What do investors want? I think the answer is pretty clear. They want the highest return. They want the lowest risk. They want the greatest liquidity, which means that they should be able to withdraw anytime they want. Now, in the real world, these attributes run counter to each other. I mean, if you want the highest return, then the risk is also very high, and also doesn't come with liquidity, because in order to generate return, the money has to actually be deployed somewhere and do something. But in DeFi, these parameters can be met. Although I will say that it does come with risk. I mean, you can get very high return, you can get decent, pretty good liquidity as well, but it also comes with complexity of smart contracts. But for better or worse, that is the expectation which the DeFi community has these days. They are perfectly okay with risk, as long as they get a highest return and greatest possible liquidity. Now, our current money market, which is the Omnicomp one, is based upon a fork of Compound, which is essentially a money market where you stake assets and you borrow something else. So when you stake something, let's say you staked Reef, for instance, you need somebody else to borrow that Reef on the other end and pay interest in the form of Reef tokens, so that interest is then given as return to the person who staked it in the first place. Obviously, the borrow rate is always higher than the supply rate, to incentivize the suppliers and to discourage the borrowers, and then it finds a balance. What this also means that there is again a balance between how much is borrowed, because the more your borrowings go, so for example, borrowings and interest rate, the higher your borrowings, the greater the interest rate. So that much is pretty clear. But if everything is borrowed, then there is not enough liquidity. So liquidity, unfortunately, comes at the cost of borrowings. So liquidity, unfortunately, in our model is inversely proportional to borrowings. The more the borrowings, the greater the return. So borrowings are directly proportional to return, but liquidity is inversely proportional, which means that we need to strike a balance between liquidity, borrowings, and return in order to give something which is attractive to investors. We need some amount of money not being borrowed, but that means that is unused capital, which means that although you can withdraw anytime that you want, or some people can withdraw anytime you want or they want, but that capital is not making any return on it. It also means that the model unfortunately can't deal with a run on the bank situation. I mean, all that will happen is you can't do any more withdrawals while their borrowings are there. The interest rate will keep on going up, which hopefully should incentivize more suppliers. But there is a give and take between liquidity, borrowings, and return. That's the reality of the current model. So when we are trying to attract TVL, we have around about 10 million plus right now. We are competing against other people, such as, let's say, a lot of PCS pancake farms. There is this Beefy, and I'm only talking about PCS, BSC stuff. There are obviously other things on other chains, but there are all these farms, and they generate like 3-digit returns, and also have 100% liquidity, which means you can go in and out anytime you want, and there is no restriction on that, and you have significantly higher returns than what we can offer, because their model is actually not based upon borrowings. Their model is based upon the teams actually giving away their tokens to incentivize some action which they want you to take. For example, Pancake wants you to stake cake with them, which sort of in turn drives up the price of cake itself because the supply is reduced. And same thing for other strategies as well. There is somebody else giving something out of their pocket to help them incentivize. They're actually trying to incentivize you to perform certain actions which they want you to perform. So that's where the return is coming from. It's coming out of somebody's pocket, which is the team's pocket in general. But the point is, there is the option of high return and high liquidity. The risk is, it's questionable. Like PCS kind of is okay. You have the issue with centralization with BSC chain in general, but that being aside, the risk is kind of acceptable. What AutoFarm and BSC does in general is they will allow you to stake into farms, and they periodically harvest your tokens, and then they reinvest in the farm using by selling that on the market. Sell, get new tokens, and then they put you back in the farms. So that sort of optimizes the return. So for example, if a farm was generating, let's say 25% return by harvesting periodically and restaking it, instead of doing it manually, the Beefy or Auto Farms of the world will harvest and restake for you periodically, and that effectively supercharges your return, which instead of 25%, just making this up, it could be 125%. So that point it becomes a no-brainer, provided you are okay with the risk associated with the smart contracts of these guys. And there are these kind of things get hacked all the time, and billions and billions are lost. But just be aware, the return comes at the cost of significant smart contract complexity. Now, assuming you're okay with this, we can actually look at a solution which we can potentially adopt. So when you deposit something to a farm, for example, we have BUSD, USGO farm, okay, and you are earning various tokens. You have Reef, you have Metalex, you have Fetch, and more partners are coming. We have BUSD, USGO, we have Rozon USGO, we have BDP USGO, and more are coming. More partners are lining up over with us, and they want to give us incentives so that we can set up these farms against USGO. Now, when somebody deploys to these farms, that is money deployed in the farm, and that is being used to provide liquidity to this pair so that people can transact against each other. But that LP is locked, okay, and that is generating a return for you. However, so these LP tokens are locked, and they are attracting rewards, which are usually the partner tokens plus fees. And every time you unstake or harvest, the rewards come to you. Okay. We can always do auto compounding as well, which will supercharge the returns. But the reality is, these LP tokens which are locked in here in the farm, they are actually assets. Okay. So if, for example, when you go to a bank and you deposit money in the bank, and the bank is then using the money for something else, let's say you did a fixed deposit with the bank. That fixed deposit is an asset, and that's the same concept with claim tokens, the C tokens or the K tokens in our money market. We can actually give people a claim token, which basically represents their locked liquidity. Okay. So effectively, what we can do is, if you deposit some LP tokens or any other token in the farms, then we can give you a claim token, which actually is an asset, which means that you can actually pass that claim token to somebody else, A to B, and then you don't have to unstake your assets. The farm ownership basically goes to B in that case. So basically we can tokenize these deployments to the farm, or for example, of beefy strategy or a super farm, auto farm strategy, and we can tokenize that as a claim token, and that is now an asset because it represents locked value. Okay, and we can then use this claim token as collateral to mint USGO. Now, that is a big idea because you can get while you are deposited in there, you get very high yield. You get 100% liquidity, very high yield, 100% liquidity, which means you can withdraw anytime. There's no need for borrowers over here, and because you are now treating your deposits as an asset, you can borrow USGO against it. Now, what that means is this is probably the highest capital efficiency solution which you can come across with. You can borrow USGO against it, and you can now use this USGO to, you can sell the USGO or deploy, get new tokens, stake, get more claim tokens, borrow more USGO. So you can actually really supercharge your income using this approach. And you spend, obviously there is a lot of risk. I mean, you are over leveraging yourselves, and any change in price, etc., can bring the whole thing down. But assuming you're okay with the risk, you can really supercharge your outcomes. You know what you're doing. You can easily get into 3 digits, 4 digits kind of a return using this by getting almost like 10 times the capital value than what you deployed using essentially what is a fractional reserve type solution. And that's what we are going to do. We are going to use this to grow our TVL significantly, and we are going to allow people to we are going to continue with our partnership strategy, which means that for example, if you have a Reef or a Metalix, or now we have Trust Wallet in the wings, we have BDP, Rozon, and more people come. So they will stay. But what we are going to do is these will be used as collateral. Stake them, mint USGO. But we don't really see the point of allowing borrowings against these anymore. You can borrow USGO, but there's no point offering a return by running the money market. So we'll go back to kind of the version 1 kind of a model where you stake the asset and you borrow USGO against it, but there is no direct return on these itself, because the reality is the return on them directly is not much anyway. And for all other assets such as Cake, BNB, ETH, or any other LPs, etc., we are going to go with strategies. So essentially we will find whatever the best strategies for those particular assets are, tokenize them, use as collateral, and mint USGO. That should offer us the highest capital efficiency, highest yields, highest liquidity, and that should really supercharge TVL growth. Now there are obviously challenges with this, because there are some aspects to it which need to be worked out. For example, when you deploy to a pool, then essentially the pool steadily grows in size. So basically, as the return starts kicking in, the pool's size keeps on growing. So depending upon when you come in, your share of the pool is either this much if you deposited $100. But if you came on day 1, then obviously your share is going to progressively grow. So it might be this much as compared to somebody who came later, and then their share will be less. So which means that we have to account for when that person came, have some sort of a fixed rate from claim tokens to underlying pool. And these are all the things which we already do in our money market, where we have the C tokens which have an FX rate, etc. And these are solvable issues. We have solved them before. Compound has solved them before. But unfortunately, these are also the places where things get hacked, where there are examples of projects getting hacked due to FX rates getting manipulated. For example, Popsicle Finance recently got hacked due to a vulnerability over there. So we have to watch out when we set up our smart contracts. So essentially what we are going to do is we are going to have wrappers. So let's say you have a strategy. And what we'll do is we'll basically build a wrapper which allows people to come to our platform, deploy via the wrapper to the strategy, and get a claim token. Deploy the tokens, get a claim, and then those claims can be staked and mint USDO. Now, obviously, depending upon the strategy, the wrappers might look a little bit different. So we might have to, we can't really do a vanilla wrapper one for everything because smart contracts kind of differ. So we might need more than one wrapper for sure. But beyond a certain point, we should be okay. Yeah, so eventually what we really want to do is we want to do a permissionless design, which means we do the DAO handover. Anybody can come up with their strategy, and then the DAO can accept it. And this is now in the yield Yearn Finance territory, or essentially Yearn Finance territory, where anybody can propose a strategy and we accept it. The DAO accepts it. We issue wrappers for it. And those wrappers can be used as collateral and mint USDO. So this whole thing should work very beautifully and which allow us to really supercharge our growth. So the other thing which we are working on is we obviously want to get more eyeballs on this approach, which means that we have to work with the auto farms and the beefies of the world. And that is something which we are already working on, and you will hear about that soon. And obviously our target is to reach as high a TVL as possible. I mean, we want to reach 500,000 to 1 billion TVL. Obviously a lot of things depend upon, this depends upon a lot of things. But I think if we do things logically, where we basically get into the shoes of the investor, what they really want, and that's very clear. People want the highest return, they want the lowest risk. But they're willing to compromise on the risk. They want the best liquidity. And if we can give all of those and also allow people to borrow against it, I mean, at that point it becomes a complete no-brainer. I mean, who wouldn't want this? We should easily become the biggest stable coin in the world as far as DeFi is concerned using this approach. So that's what we are working on. This is already underway. We are going to move as fast as possible without breaking things. And you will hear from us in the near future. Thanks. Bye.